afternoon, YouTube. This is Chuck, and it's Friday, March 22nd, 2024, early afternoon. And as you can see, I'm driving my old truck, and this thing's been acting a little bit goofy lately, and it always taxes me and challenges me to keep the darn thing running right. It seems like it's got one little old problem after another, but it's a 1992 truck, so it's coming up on 32 years old, so I guess it's not real unusual to think that would be an issue. So I thought I'd kind of bring you up to date on it, and I've got a lot of new subscribers that probably aren't familiar with the trials and tribulations I ran through with this thing, so I thought maybe I'd talk just a little bit about this while I'm doing a little test drive here. I've had this truck for almost 10 years now, and this particular body style, they made it from 1992 to 96 in the half tons, and 92 to 97 in the 3/4 tons. And this was referred to by the truck people as the OBS style, and OBS stands simply for old body style. And I've always been kind of fond of these things. It's my favorite style of old Ford truck, and this is the fourth one of them I've had. I had a 95 3/4 ton, I had a 96 half ton, I had a 97 1-ton dually, which last year they made that body style in 97. And now this one here is a 92, and it's a 3/4 ton. And this one's an old Town of Payson truck, and the street department used it for many years. And when I bought it, it had a bunch of mechanical problems, and I only ended up giving $900 for it. And my original idea with it was I was going to make it into a hot rod, and I was going to lower it, and I was going to make it into kind of a rat rod, Mac and Max kind of thing. And what ended up happening with it is I realized how pristine a condition it was in, and never been wrecked, and didn't have any rust on the body at all, and spent its whole life here just driving around town, which is what we're doing right now. And I just couldn't bring myself to start whacking on it, and so I went ahead and I just drove it the way it was for quite a number of years. And when I bought it, it had an engine problem, and I'm gonna have to pull over up here a little bit and let somebody go by me, because I'm talking to you, so I'm not really paying as good of attention as where I'm going as I should be. So let me find a pull out, like right here sounds like a good one, and I'll let this is another city truck, I'll let him go by me. There we go. Anyway, when I bought this truck, it had a coolant leak, and wasn't sure where it was coming from originally. But what I finally traced it down to is it was a blown head gasket. Now, a lot of times blown head gaskets they'll get coolant in the oil and oil in the coolant and contaminate everything and make a big mess. Well, this never did that. What it ended up doing is it was pushing the coolant out the front of the driver's side head, between the head and the block, and so it would leak. Well, you could drive it that way. It didn't run very good, but you could drive it that way, and the road's a little bumpy if the camera's jumping around. I'll find a place up here to pull off where I can talk to you. Sometimes it's okay to try to talk to the camera while you're driving, but probably not the safest thing in the world. But anyway, so I drove it for 4 years that way, just being real careful to make sure that it didn't run out of coolant and it didn't have any problems that way. And this is my kind of around town truck. And of course, I've got a newer truck, and I've got the van for trips. So this truck here is just what I normally just drive around town and go to the brush pit and use for maintenance around the house, and just so I don't have to scratch up my new truck. And I think everybody needs an old pickup for that, especially if you live in a rural town. Anyway, so finally it started getting worse and worse. And like I said, I bought the truck in 2014, and so I drove it for about 4 years, and eventually that coolant leak started getting worse and worse. And it finally got to the point where every place I go with it, it'd be marking its spot. And it got to the point where it was embarrassing. And so I finally decided maybe the thing to do would be to just park it for a while until I got a chance to work on it. Well, a couple things kind of got in the way. Number one is that I'm not a wealthy guy, and I knew it was going to take a little bit of money to fix it. And I was thinking about, here's a good place to pull over and stop right here. We're going to stop right here in the shade of this tree, so I can talk a little bit more about the story without having to try to dodge traffic. We'll just turn the motor off, and there we go. Anyway, the truck got to the point where it wasn't running very well, and it was leaking coolant all over the place, and it still never did contaminate the oil with the coolant or the coolant with the oil, which of course that's the thing you always worry about when you blow a head gasket. But it never did that, but it did leak coolant. It was getting to the point where it leaked coolant pretty bad. And in the summertime, it wasn't a big deal because I could put water in it. Of course, in the wintertime, I had to run coolant so it wouldn't freeze. And so I finally parked it. And at the same time when that was going on, I was having some medical issues. And one of the medical issues that I had was I had absolutely no energy to do anything. And I've talked about that in another video. In fact, in the description on this video, I'll put a link to that other video. And it had to do with the fact that I had diabetes and didn't know it. And but I cured that. But that's another story. That's kind of a sidebar to this one. And we won't tell that story here. But basically, I parked the truck and it sat at my house for about a year. And I thought about selling it, but you can't get anything out of a vehicle that doesn't run. I'd be lucky to get $500 out of it, even though the utility bed and stuff is worth $1,500. But originally, I only paid $900 for it, and so I figured I'd gotten my money out of it, even if I had to have it hauled to the scrapyard. I'd gotten my money out of it. So what ended up happening is, COVID came along, and in the meantime, I'd figured out what was wrong with me medically, and I figured out how to deal with it. And I ended up getting my health back, and I ended up getting my energy back, and I ended up losing a bunch of weight in the process. And all of a sudden, COVID came along, and I was looking for something to do for a COVID project, and I had the energy. So during COVID, I went ahead and I pulled the old truck out. It always did start and run, but I pulled it up in front of the garage, and I went ahead and I dropped the transmission out of it, and I pulled the engine out of it, and pulled the engine apart. Fixed everything that was wrong with it. It leaked everything, so I went through it just methodically and replaced all the gaskets and seals and fixed all the leaks, and just took my time that whole summer of 2020 and got the old thing back together. Well, in the process, of course, I started finding other little things that were wrong with it, and the 92 Fords of this body style and stuff, they had a very, very complicated and failure-prone emission system on them. And this thing here was all smogged down real bad. It had about 1.5 miles of vacuum lines controlling everything, and a smog pump, and all this kind of stuff. And so in Arizona, when a vehicle gets to be so old, they don't test emissions anymore. So I thought maybe I originally tried to fix everything and make it right, but none of that stuff was available anymore. And so finally, I was watching YouTube videos, and I finally decided I'm just going to take the emissions off of this thing. It's called an emissions delete. And so I just took almost all that stuff off. There's still a little bit of stuff on here, but for the most part, I took all the complicated stuff off, disconnected replaced the vacuum lines that were leaking everywhere. And in the process, and when I had it apart, I did a couple other little things to it. In the process, I woke up that motor, and I probably gave it, 50 or 60 more horsepower, and just made it a whole lot more fun to drive. Runs better, and but it's been kind of a little challenge. It's almost like it has a life of its own. It seems like whenever I get everything figured out on it, it starts running good. It seems like it makes some kind of a conscious decision to mess up just so I have to pay more attention to it again. And so it's been kind of a challenge. I've thought about selling it a million times, but I've kind of bonded with the old thing, and so every time something happens to it, I just sometimes I'll park it for a couple days till I feel like working on it. And well, that's what happened. That's what's happened this time. And one of the issues it's had is that it runs a little bit rich. And when it runs rich, it's number one, it gets terrible gas mileage. But number two, it ends up fuel fouling the spark plugs. And so I've been fiddling around trying to figure out what that is and how I can fix that. And I think it's a sensor in the fuel injection system, but I've replaced them all. And so if it is a sensor, it's a bad one. And I haven't figured it out yet. I will eventually. But a little while back, I thought I had it figured out, and I put a brand new set of spark plugs in it. And if you watch my last video on this truck, they lasted 11 weeks to the day, and the darn thing fouled the plug again. And so I cleaned that. I figured out which one it was. I took it out and I cleaned it and I put it back in and drove the truck for a couple more days, and I figured I need to clean the rest of the plugs. So in the process of doing all that, I bought a pretty heavy-duty fuel system cleaner in it. But one of the other associated issues that it's had is that when it gets down below a quarter of a tank, it starts running bad. Well, that leads me to believe that it's probably got an air leak somewhere down in the pickup in the fuel pump, which is located in the fuel tank. So as long as the tank is full, it runs fine. But when it gets down below a quarter of a tank, it starts running bad. So the last couple posts when I was talking about it, and the last video I was talking about it, I figured I'm going to have to pull that fuel tank and check it and see it's either a bad fuel pump or it's got fuel system contamination. But I figured I cleaned all the rest of the spark plugs and I put it back together, and I started up, tried to drive it, and the darn thing wouldn't run worth a hoot. And so I figured, well, now I might as well go ahead and change out that fuel pump. At least rule that out. Like if I pull it out of there and don't find anything wrong with it, at least I know what's in there. And so I was planning on doing that actually yesterday. And so I started the truck up and got ready to move it over in front of the garage door where I could work on it. And the darn thing's running bad. It's only running on 7 cylinders, and it acts for all the world like it's got a fouled spark plug again. And I thought, well, it can't be. I just cleaned them all. But what had happened is the one that was, we're by the airport. You probably hear an airplane going by. What ended up happening was that the one that was missing before was cylinder number 8, which is the one on the back of the driver's side bank of the engine on a Ford. And I'd taken that out, and I found it to be fuel fouled, and I cleaned it and put it back in there. Well, then over the next couple of days, when I had a few minutes, I'd go pull a couple more out, and I ended up cleaning the other 7. But when I started up, it was running bad again. So I knew that the other 7, I hadn't even been out of the yard with it, so I knew they couldn't be bad. So the only one that could possibly be bad would be that one on number 8 cylinder. So yesterday I went ahead and I pulled that back out, and by golly, it was fuel fouled again. Well, the thing hadn't driven 10 miles. It was sparkling clean, but it was fuel fouled. Okay, what's that tell me? That tells me that the fuel injector stuck. That's all it could be. So I went ahead and I cleaned that up, put it back in. Truck runs fine. And what I'm thinking might have happened on that regard, I still at some point in time need to pull the fuel tank and check that, if nothing else, to rule it out as a problem. But the fuel pump for that, I looked up to see how much that thing cost, and they're getting pretty proud of those things. It was close to $200. And so I decided I couldn't afford that right this minute. And the truck started running good again. And what I think might have happened, and I might be wrong, but what I think might have happened is that when I put the fuel system cleaner in there, it might have kicked loose a little piece of varnish or something that might have found its way down into that fuel injector and might have stuck that thing open. And of course, when it sticks it open, when you shut the motor off, it's going to bleed all the fuel out of that system through that fuel injector into that cylinder, and it'll fuel foul that plug. Now, I don't know for sure that's what happened, but that's kind of what I'm theorizing. And the proper way really to fix that fuel injector problem would be just to replace them. But once again, if you ever replace fuel injectors, the darn things are expensive. They're $144 a piece through Rock Auto. And that means there's 8 of them. So that means it costs $1,150 to replace them all. And I just don't want to spend that kind of money right now. So what I'm doing is I'm doing it the poor boy route. I got the truck running good right now. I've been driving it around to make sure to get the motor warmed up good. Because part of the problem, I think, is that it makes a lot of short trips and never gets driven enough to warm it up. So that's kind of where I'm at. I ended up not pulling the fuel tank, even though I said I was gonna. I may still have to do that at some point, but for right now, the thing's running like a champ. We're actually going to start it up, and I'll run it through the gears here just a little bit, just to show you how it's running. But it's one of them crazy old things. Every time I think I got all the problems on it whipped, it kicks out a new one, and it's just a hobby. Makes my brain work, and I think we all, especially when you get to be my age, we need something to keep our minds active. And even if it's a little old, beat up old truck that taxes your mechanical ability, at least it's keeping my mind going, and my mind's not turning to mush, at least not yet anyway. So let me start this thing back up. As you notice, it starts right away. It's idling good, and pull back out of here and head off down the road here a little bit. Okay, we're on a back road. There's nobody coming. See, it runs good when it runs. It's like a hot rod. So anyway, that kind of brings you up to date on where I'm at in my old truck, and hope instead of bouncing around, the road's a little bit bumpy. Couldn't let you go right quite yet. Got to show you the view. Let this run for just a little bit. These houses up here have nice views. There we're up at the airport. You can see the gorgeous Mogollon Rim in the background there. A little bit of patches of snow here and there you can still see. And there's, oh look at there, there's a used helicopter there on that trailer. So like I always tell you, take care of each other and love each other and take care of yourself. Have a great day, and we'll be back with another one real quick. So peace out.